God, I love that feature. And here it is. It says that Quebec to impose a health tax on unvaccinated Canadians. So now not only might I can imagine some people are going to get very upset because now not only might you not have access to certain things, there'll now ostensibly be some sort of tax for refusing to be vaccinated. So there's now a financial penalty on top of loss of access to certain social services, perhaps. Quebec, which has seen the highest.
Yeah, it was
highest
on the,
one second,
it
Miss.
was on
One second.
TV as well.
Let me stop the audio here for a second.
Hold on, Messi.
Messi, it says the Canadian province of Quebec will charge a health tax for residents who are not vaccinated. Quebec, which has seen the highest number of COVID related deaths in Canada, is currently struggling with a surge in cases. On Tuesday, the Premier announced that it would be the first in the nation to financially penalize the unvaccinated. Only about 12.8% of Quebec residents are not vaccinated, but they make up nearly a third of all hospital cases. According to federal data, just over 85% of Quebec residents had received at least one vaccine dose by January 1st. Premier Francois Legault said during the news conference that people who have not received their first dose of vaccine will have to pay a contribution, quote unquote, contribution. The fee has not yet been decided, but will be, quote unquote, significant, he said. I think right now it's a question of fairness for the 90% of the population who have made some sacrifices. Mr. Legault said, I think we owe them this kind of measure. Last week, the province announced that it would require proof of vaccination to shop in government cannabis and liquor stores.
Why do they call it a sacrifice?
A social sacrifice that people became vaccinated. I know what you mean. In Japan, Cheryl expressing a view from a sort of Japanese perspective, which is the entirety of being Japanese is about social sacrifice. The number one thought in your head 24 hours a day is diminishing yourself to the to the benefit of others. That is the essence of Japaneseness, by the way.
That makes me laugh.
It never leaves the front of your mind at all times in Japan. So the idea that you wouldn't do this, that it's just the idea that you wouldn't sacrifice for the rest of society is a non-starter for Japanese in some sense.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because to vaccinate themselves is to protect themselves, right? Anyhow, Singapore has something similar. Prior to this, the unvaccinated will have to pay their full medical bills without subsidy in the event that they fall sick. But right now, they are saying that from Valentine's Day onwards, February 14, for those 18 and above who refused, who did not go for their booster shot, if their last shot was 8 months ago, they will also have to face the same kind of like penalty. That means in the event that they fall sick, if they have only 2 shots and not the third shot, then they will also have to pay their full medical fee with no subsidies. But of course, health insurance still applies.
Tyler,
Hold
wasn't New Zealand and Australia were also considering similar taxes to people who were refusing to receive vaccination?
That would not surprise me given the approach of Australia and New Zealand thus far. But as far as I know, this is sort of the first. Quebec might be the first to take this kind of a strong approach. I know France's Macron and Canada both have both come out with really strong language in recent days saying enough's enough. We've been very patient, essentially, and now we're going to get down to business, and there'll start being penalties. No more carrot, a little more stick to be expected. But by the way, where was it that they were actually offering $100 to go get vaccinated? Somewhere in New York or something like that.
Yeah, that was in New York.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's various
they were
carrots
also
and sticks, Tyler. I
they
mean,
were doing
More than
one
one state
indirect
did
tax that's going to happen in the U.S. is your health insurance premium is going to go up significantly if you're unvaccinated. So that's
why
another one of
Tyler
the
suggested a cruise
tips.
for
Okay,
that.
hold on, Eric. I'm going to do air traffic control for a bit. We'll go May and then BB. Go ahead, May.
Thank you, Tyler. You know what I find really interesting in this conversation, which I think you being from the United States
My question is, from an indirect perspective, is how much is this really going to hold weight when so many people are not even covered in their insurance already? Like there's so many people that don't even have healthcare in the United States. What kind of impact will that make on people that already are stuck with medical bills, that already have to pay all that themselves? I don't think the United States could really necessarily implement something like that because people are already uninsured and people already have
Yeah, but
struggles
the
paying
vaccines
healthcare.
are free, May. The vaccines are free
No,
in the
I
United
know they're free, but I'm just saying imposing something similar to Quebec wouldn't make logical sense because if in fact the vaccine is free, it doesn't matter. Their healthcare is still not free because some people don't have healthcare. That's why they're getting the vaccine for free as well in some places because they need to get it and they want them to have the
But it's only a
vaccination.
tax on unvaccinated people. What the Canadians are doing. So if you got vaccinated, you don't have to pay the
Yes,
tax.
correct. But if someone's unvaccinated in the United States and they try to impose that, I think that would be very, very tricky because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that don't even have health insurance. And the impact of like what Cheryl was saying about, just making it that they're responsible for their own medical bills, regardless of whether they're vaccinated or not. And all I was trying to dovetail in there, Tyler, is that a lot of people do not have medical insurance in the United States and do pay
I
out of
don't think
pocket
you're
a
right.
lot.
And I think you need to check your facts on that one. It's
Like I
only
was saying, I
8.6,
really, really, Tyler, I really,
8.6%.
really think it's really rude when I'm trying to state something and someone tells me about checking facts. Why don't we take a breather at the fact that I know a number of minorities that do not have healthcare, nor could they afford it, and go without healthcare. So let's kind of roll that back a little bit and recognize that there's a number of people in the United States that are uninsured. And if you wanted me to check my facts, I'm Latina. I know very well from the family and the people that I know in my own circle. And I'm from New York City. Just because I'm abroad does not mean that I do not and have not lived most of my life in New York City.
Okay, well, I mean, no doubt we can pull up this data on the number of uninsured.
It's about 9% of the country is uninsured of the United States.
Okay, thanks again. So, any other really interesting COVID developments in the past 24, 48 hours?
Well, there was an interesting story from China, Tyler. I tagged Tech News on these kind of internment camps that China set up for COVID quarantine or suspected quarantine, and there's been video coming out.
Right.
And they're like these football stadiums of like pods that people are stuck in. It's pretty shocking for Western standards to look at something like that.
Yeah, indeed. And basically, it's because China takes a very strong approach on the geographical containment aspect, which, by the way, the virus spreads geographically. So one way you can control it, the spread of it, the way you stop a virus from spreading viruses spread geographically. That's how they spread. And if you can contain them geographically, you can defeat them from spreading geographically. So and China is very strong on that particular approach. And that approach worked very well pre-Omicron, as it did here in Thailand. And most of Asia took this sort of approach. And it even worked with Delta here in Thailand. But Omicron's a slightly different beast due to the high R naught factor. And this is going to be a really wild ride to watch.
Yeah, and I think no one would disagree about the need for quarantine. But if you look at this article, it's I just DM'd you.
Right.
It's like pregnant women and kids locked in tiny cells.
Yeah. Well, we saw photos came out on Chinese social media yesterday of people being forced to spend the night in a supermarket in the middle of like the dog food aisle, literally sleeping on the floor of the pet food aisles. That is going viral in China itself, and some of it's getting out, and we saw it. BB shared it with us. And there was another instance of a hospital that had it, and all the doctors and nurses were forced to sleep in the hospital until once there's an outbreak, they're forcing everyone to freeze, drop and roll, stop, drop and roll, and don't move until we tell you to, because that's how you stop the virus from spreading, is no one's allowed to move. Once there's a case recognized in a certain location, and it's a huge, talk about sacrifice, talk about huge social sacrifices, having to operate under those conditions. And my heart goes out. That's because, by the way, they don't have the mRNA vaccines. That Sinovac and Sinopharm don't really provide much, if any, protection against Omicron, is the data that we've been seeing. Those are the headlines we've been reading, and thus they have to take abundantly, an abundance of caution in other measures and means to restrict transmission if they're not able to have an effective vaccine against it. Chintan, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so there is good news from India. The Covaxin has shown that it is capable to neutralize both Omicron and Delta variants. So that has been there has been a statement which has been issued by Bharat Biotech, the inventor of the vaccine. So that's a good news that we have got some vaccine which is capable to neutralize Omicron as well as the Delta variant.
Thank you.
That's it from my side. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And Tyler, there was a
Tyler,
discussion with Dr. Gillard, who's the head of the infectious disease and head of a lot of immuno or infectious disease epidemiology societies. And he was here on Clubhouse speaking about how Pfizer has the capability of developing a vaccine specific to Omicron within 100 days and can produce specific to the changes to the spike protein, and also a possibility of immunotherapy and a drug that is in clinical trial that may be available shortly. So we may have treatment available for this virus. And the fact that China have this geographically located policy is reminding me of Australia and New Zealand's zero COVID policy, where there was a mandatory quarantine which you had to pay for if you were to travel there, and they were able to keep their numbers in single digits initially, but it wasn't until they let go of that policy that the numbers started increasing. So there is some science and fact behind geographically isolating the population to reduce or stop the spread.
Okay.
one thing I was going to add is that
Messi.
talking about...
Yeah, go ahead, Messi.
Oh, sorry. She just mentioned about Australia, and one of the latest is Novak Djokovic, trying to get away with the exceptions and this and that. And now he just tweeted saying that he wanted to clarify misinformation. One of them is just, it blows my mind, is that after he knew that he was positive, he went and got a videotaping or coverage with a journalist. And one of the things he mentioned is that he felt bad about last minute cancellation to him, even though, like he said, he was in a party on December 16, and then people around him were positive. So he went and got tested, but then the antigen did show negative, and then he did some events on the 17th, but then on the 18th, he found out he actually was positive, but still went out and did those interviews, even knowing that he was positive, and even he also lied on the visa application, but then he said it was his assistant mistake. So there you go. That a person being that was supposed to be a bit of a role model doing those things in Australia. Just wanted to add that.
Okay.
With the COVID thing.
A short one here. Hi, it's Johan. I've not been around for a while. There is a good reason for that.
I was just missing you, Johan.
Omicron.
Yeah, you just had it.
Yeah, I just had it. I did get tested the 20th of December and the 24th on the evening when we were opening our Christmas presents. The whole family did get another present in the form of an SMS from Folkhälsomyndigheten that we had COVID. So, and I can say this is no ordinary man cold. I was really down for 9 days, more or less.
You were double vaccinated.
I'm double. The whole family is double vaccinated with what we thought was the best one, and that's the Comirnaty Pfizer version.
Right. So we've now come full circle, because we started today by saying how Sweden is now reporting that 40% of tests are coming back positive for Omicron. And here comes Johan, who's been out for a while. By the way, you've been very much missed, Johan. Great to hear your voice.
I miss you, Johan.
And And you and I talked about this 3 months ago, that Sweden was going to get really hard hit this winter. And sure enough, the spike is unprecedented. This is truly remarkable, amount of. Seems like everybody is getting it in Sweden, unfortunately, because Sweden kind of missed Delta to a degree, and so if they aren't triple vaxxed, they're gonna get and I think Johan, you can confirm that people still aren't really wearing masks there, because that's just the culture of Sweden with regard to this. Yeah.
It's not only that we don't have it in our culture. That's one thing. But the thing is that we also have the major authority that should actually recommend everybody to do it. Says that no, mask has no effect. There is no effect in masks. We won't have it. Even during the first couple of months of the pandemic, they actually even told people in care of elderly that no, you don't need mask, you don't need protected equipment. Cough, cough. We don't have any because we don't. Since we reacted so slowly, the market was empty when we tried to purchase for us. So we actually don't recommend people to use masks at all. And as your Tyler said, it is actually a forest fire in Sweden. The thing is that you can't even get tests anymore because the tests are out. They are flying. They're taking tests in Stockholm and flying them to Germany to have them analyzed, because there is no tests available to get. If you can get a test, it will get half of them is sent to Germany to be processed, because we don't have the capabilities in Sweden, and we only had this pandemic for what, 2 years? Fucking monker.
So I can hear your frustration. By the way, that's the sound of a Swede going absolutely ballistic right there.
Yeah, well, so
This is as worse as it gets.
That's as bad as it gets right there. That's furious, fuming Swedism right there. So the Professor Osif sent in an article in the past 24 hours to Tech News Around the World that's relevant, and the headline is 5 reasons you should not deliberately catch Omicron to get it over with. This is for you, Johan. It says, in case the thought had crossed your mind, here are 5 reasons you should not purposely try to catch Omicron. Number 1, it's not a bad cold. Significant fever, body aches, swollen lymph nodes, sore throats, and heavy congestion are often reported, even in mild cases of Omicron variant, leaving people debilitated for days. People are talking about Omicron like it's a bad cold. It's not a bad cold. It's a life-threatening disease. A recent study of over 1 million people published by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found the risk of a severe outcome from COVID-19 was higher in vaccinated people who were 65 years or over, people with weakened immune systems, or people who had at least one of the following health conditions: diabetes or chronic kidney, cardiac, pulmonary, neurologic, or liver disease. However, even people without any underlying health conditions can get severely ill. I have a vaccinated booster patient right now, blah, 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 blah. Number 2, you could get long COVID. Losing your sense of smell and therefore sense of taste has become a more common symptom in mild cases of COVID-19. Studies show that some 80% of people recover the ability within a month or so, but others still can't smell or taste after 6 months or more. An unfortunate few may never regain those 2 senses. As unpleasant as that may be, it's only one of a number of health concerns that can last after a case of COVID-19. Number 3, you're spreading the disease to children. Just over half, 54% of children between 12 and 17 eligible for COVID-19 vaccines have been fully vaccinated. Only 23% of children between 5 and 11 have received their first dose, etc. Number 4, you'll stress the healthcare system by deliberately catching any variant of SARS-CoV-2, which is the official name of the novel coronavirus. You're going to keep the pandemic going and stress the healthcare system. Number 5, don't mess with Mother Nature. Was it ever a good idea to catch a disease on purpose? Those of a certain age will recall when parents used to host chickenpox parties to expose their young children to an infected child because cases of adult chickenpox are more severe. The idea was to have your child catch it early to get it over with. Anywho, thank you for that.
And then you get shingles when you're an adult because you had chickenpox when you were a kid.
Get your shingles vaccine if you're over 50.
I know, yeah, I've got mine, yeah.
Okay, so should we get
just to add on to
closing thoughts?
just to add on
Go ahead.
No, just to very quickly add into that, I was saying yesterday I was next to a person on New Year's, dinner and stuff, and got COVID the next day, and he isn't still in a hospital with oxygen. And this is a person who had 3 vaccinations, including the booster. So it is not a joke. It really is not a joke. I know a lot of people, including him, including my sister-in-law, who has a very, very long, 7 months long COVID with blood clot on her lung. So it's not a joke.
Yeah, thank you.
There was an article,
And
Tyler,
also,
about Reuters about the South Korean delegation at CES in Las Vegas, and 70 of them tested positive.
Ouch.
I don't know the medical status, but if you're visiting the U.S. from a place like South Korea, you can't go back now, right? I mean, you're stuck here. You got to quarantine, test again. Even then, when you get back to South Korea, you're going to go back into quarantine. So I don't know. I wonder if CES was really worth it.
Ironically,
and Tyler, those of you who are interested in the latest data by Dr. Gillette, that talk is still available on Tech News, where he mentioned how pregnant females, when they contracted COVID, developed so many different complications, including stillbirths, loss of pregnancy, and the rate of infection was associated with congenital heart diseases, and how it is affecting the pediatric population. So I would highly suggest to go and listen to his amazing numbers and research.
okay. So
Just a short one here. In
go.
Gothenburg, at the primary delivery facility where you give birth to children, they have 3 different avdelningar. What's the name for it? They have 3 separate where they have about 30 to 40 to be moms or just have become moms. In 2 of 3 of these departments are COVID positive, and they have an outbreak because 66% of the pregnant women in Sweden has skipped the vaccine during the last year.
Oh wow.
Just because they were pregnant. So we have so on top of that. So the what's the name? The maids' names that actually delivers the babies. They say that we are in full equipment, and we need to change it because we don't know if the one we are going into has the Delta or the Omicron. So they exit the room. They wash their military grade face mask. They have actually a gas mask. A Swedish military has provided gas masks to the ones working in the delivery services. They wash it with alcohol and change the whole equipment and goes into the next room. So and they say, but this is unbearable. This is even worse in intensive care because in intensive care you have 1 patient, but in the delivery as a maid you have 2 or 3 to be moms working with in parallel, and you need to change equipment in between going into the room. So it's really, really, really hysteric in Sweden right now. You undone.
Yeah.
And Tyler, this past Sunday on the or during this Sunday's Tech News Med room, there's a study from the UK, a really big study, that basically they're saying that 1 in 2 can get or are getting some degree of long COVID. 1 in 2.
Yeah.
So the story really has to be, it's time to re-anchor the story completely with regards to the risk, and the big thing to really try hard to stay away from is the long COVID, since we're still learning about what that fully means. But the sense of smell is one thing, but cognitive issues is a whole different ballgame with regards to how it affects the rest of your life. So
I
thanks.
know, because John's not on stage at the moment, I know he would mention that one of the long COVID concerns is a drop in IQ of 1 standard deviation, which that's
John just entered the room, by the way. He's down there.
fantastic.
Bring him up.
Yeah. John, raise your hand. I'm trying to look for you. Oh, there he is.
Tyler, can I haven't
Yes, Ben.
never said much about COVID. Can I just briefly, in less than a minute, share my personal thinking and actions
Yes.
on COVID? Go
ahead.
So basically, it all came out. I'm like, fuck, what's that? vaccines come out. I think sounds a little bit dodgy, sounds like a scam. I'm going to leave it. So I basically stayed at home for 3 months and waited till millions of people had vaccines, did some research in that time, concluded I absolutely must have the vaccine on balance of evidence after resisting it for 3 months. Everybody telling me to, GPs, hospitals, everybody texting me, you've got to have a vaccine, you've got to have a vaccine. I'm like, no, I want to see what's going on. Chose the vaccine I wanted, which was Pfizer, by telling them I was pregnant, which was a laugh. Then I'm like the masking
Congratulations,
thing.
by the way.
So cheap petri dishes and agar gels and a bit of a Heath Robinson. Yeah, what's that? On taking the vaccine?
No, on becoming pregnant.
On what, Tyler?
On becoming pregnant.
Oh, I think my reception dropped out. Sorry, congratulations on what?
On becoming pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, buddy. It was hard work, first of its kind. So then masks.
Who's got
Well, are masks
pregnant,
worth it?
Tyler?
Yeah, no. They gave me some funny looks when I arrived. So then,
Ben got
the next thing was,
Ben
yeah,
got pregnant, and thus he was able to take the particular vaccine that he wanted.
What are you talking about?
it turns out in
Ben
the
is pregnant.
Congratulations,
Oh,
Ben.
what
Congratulations.
technology is it?
it's a
Ben's a
sham.
billionaire
Ben
now.
is trying to share something serious.
You tell them you're pregnant and they give you the Pfizer.
Ben,
That was the
I
story.
think technically you were pregnant with a great idea, is what you were implying.
Yeah. So that was that. And then there was the mask thing. So I got some agar gel and in some petri dishes and did some coughing tests and stuck them in the airing cupboard. And I concluded for myself, without having to believe anybody else, that there's a huge difference between no mask and a surgical mask, and a huge difference between a surgical mask and a decent, well-fitted N99 mask, which I now own. So I verified that for myself. It does make a huge difference, both on what ends up on my lips if someone coughs at me and what ends up on a surface if I cough or breathe. So good mask seems to, from my basic, one person simple study, self-verified, seems to make a difference. So I now wear a mask. And then it interestingly got to, should my daughter get vaccinated? She's 12. I'm like, what the fuck's the point of that? If she gets it, she's not going to be ill, particularly. And then I realized that thinking was wrong because there's two concerns. Firstly, long COVID and the uncertainty around long COVID. I really don't want that, or for my daughter. But the other thing, I'm not sure if it was in Professor Asif's list, but certainly it's on my list of reasons not to get COVID, or to get vaccinated, rather, is the longer the virus, I believe, is in your body, the more likely it is to be the next mutation happens in you. So there's a wider ethical concern. You want to get over it as quick as possible to minimize the chance that you create the next variant. So that was my thinking through the whole thing. So now I, still see people use masks, good quality masks heavily, take the vaccine because it's free after waiting months and studying it and making sure it's not all a scam. So that was my journey, and I'm so grateful to the UK, A, for vaccinating us 3 times for free, and B, for providing us as many at-home tests as we want. We can do a lateral flow test every day at home for free, whenever we want, PCR whenever we want, just send it off. So yeah, thanks UK. Otherwise, that's it. That was
Yeah,
my
and
journey
we
anyway.
should say thank you to the government because, I don't care what people are going on about Boris this, Boris that, but Boris is now, maybe in 2020, we may have lost a lot of lives unnecessarily because we weren't prepared for it. But subsequently, in the terms of war, we're winning the war. And that's due to the government, NHS, being forward thinking, and our great science. And public do recognize that. Yes, there have been a few mistakes like parties and things, but we should not. We should look at the bigger picture. Sorry for
Is that
party people.
Professor Asif coming over from
Yes, it
Twitter, I'm
is.
hearing?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, welcome, Professor Asif. One quick question. A friend of mine, anecdotally, and one who's a general surgeon in Chester, I asked him about COVID. I asked him 2 questions. I said, hey, Will, firstly, are you prioritizing COVID patients? Because this is a conspiracy we hear that, you hear some people say, well, why do COVID patients get all the treatment? And basically his short answer was, no, we're not. We're taking sensible clinical decisions. And my other question to him was, what are you seeing, in intensive care? And he said that in his intensive care unit, they are only seeing, of all of the people who are in the unit who are seriously ill from COVID are all unvaccinated. Obviously, that's just one hospital. But do we know what the figures are UK-wide? If we were to ask the question of the people who are in intensive care because of COVID, what proportion of them are unvaccinated? Do we have any sort of ideas on those figures?
I don't personally, but Dr. John Campbell is a medical researcher who does a YouTube talk every day on COVID, and he gives all that kind of data. So it's pretty easy to find it out. I know that in the United States, something like 75% of the people in the hospital are unvaccinated.
Yeah,
And I don't know about intensive care.
that's a great recommendation that Dr. Francine just gave on the YouTube channel. Okay, so enough COVID chat, which we haven't done in a very long time. So indulge us today for that.
John is on stage. You wanted him to comment, right?
I've been trying to get away from it for 30 minutes, but go ahead, John. Anything you'd like to add?
Just to say that what David summarized and Ben just gave a tour de force of a brilliant person's view of how to manage this uh, based on his own personal research is just stunning. So I think it's been covered extremely well. Do not get Omicron on purpose. The long COVID is the issue. Vaccinations definitely reduce your chances of being hospitalized, end up in the ICU, end up intubated, and most of all, almost nobody who's fully vaxxed is dying. So if you look at the statistics for who's dying of COVID today, it's almost all unvaccinated. There's plenty of people in the hospital who are vaccinated, but they're not getting a severe disease and they're not dying. So the vaccines really are effective at reducing hospitalizations, reducing intubation, which is a really unpleasant experience, and almost eliminating death. Not completely, but almost eliminating death. So get your vaccines. And the last point is N95 or N100, nothing else really works effectively. And a recent study showed that the persistence of the virus in the air around people who are transmitting it is somewhere around 20 minutes. So just don't spend a second more than you have to next to people, close to people who you don't know, who may in fact be spewing tons of virus. But I think the issue's been well covered today. Thanks, Tyler.
To close out the COVID section of the program, BB just found a fantastic article that he just pinned to the top of the clubhouse room, that an 84-year-old man in India gets COVID vaccine 12 times, claiming it cures joint pain. So there you go. There's a cure for osteoporosis, arthritis. It's getting the vaccine 12 times. And I imagine he's probably pretty well covered when it comes to Omicron. I'm just to call it a hunch. So thank you for that one, BB. And let's get into.
Hey, Tyler, before
Yes?
you, I'm not going to do a COVID thing, but I did. There's one other very quick, big macro news, at least here in the United States. I just wanted to mention because it's really a historic, first time in I think 40 years at this point. We have the highest inflation rate in the United States. It's running at 7% since 1982. So we have the highest inflation rate since in 40 years, and that's a very big deal for everything in life here, including, by the way, tech companies, because the valuations of those stocks, and that's why they've been coming down. They will come down when interest rates rise, and we're probably looking at 4 rate hikes, according to the Fed chairman yesterday. People, particularly younger people, have never really seen inflation. I'm old enough to remember inflation. So this is a very big deal. I just wanted to mention that. And I believe the inflation rate in the U.S. is running significantly higher than other parts of the world, though. So.
Right.
Yeah, and when you look at interest rates going up, Ken, you remember when you used to pay like 20% for a mortgage, right? So these things can get really ugly really fast.
Yeah, somebody on Clubhouse was
Buy
trying.
some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, could I, Tyler, if I could just say something that disturbs me about all the discussion about inflation, and that is that historically, when severe prolonged inflation has occurred, there have been structural issues that have underpinned the prolonged inflation. We have transient structural issues, that being the Great Resignation and the workforce, resigning from work. So we're having to pay more for labor. We have supply chain issues because of COVID that are causing a huge gap between supply and demand, which are inflationary pressures. But once we get through the COVID pandemic, those structural transients are going to disappear. So I'm a bit concerned in terms of Fed policy and inflation, that they're looking at the current inflationary trends as if they're deeply structural when in fact they're transients associated with the pandemic. So I'd love to hear alternative explanations, but that's my view.
Well, actually, the Fed chairman agrees with you. He thinks a lot of it is transitory, but he thinks some of it's real, and that's why there's going to be a couple of rate hikes. I actually, quite frankly, think more of it's real than people realize, but but I have a different view. But the Fed chairman actually agrees with you, John.
Okay.
Of recent, yes.
Alrighty. Well, let's
Can
do.
can I make a comment about this?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so I spent 10 years as a financial planner, so I think the public doesn't understand this word that's a big catch-all called inflation. They don't even in the CPI measure it as what it really is. And the housing market for years, since the global financial crisis, has been absorbed, even BlackRock. But they're a late, when BlackRock invests in single family homes and buys up and sends letters to people to say, hey, you can stay in your home. We're essentially going to do a an accelerated reverse mortgage on you. We're going to cash you out at this rate. They don't care about the rate because they're borrowing at zero interest rates. But Amherst is a great private company who, especially, they're nationwide. They have billions of dollars of real estate, and the Fed stands between the public and the government in this quasi-government situation, where they protect the interest of banks, which is a fraction, which is why crypto and why people want to go DeFi is because the whole system is inflated by the fractional reserve banking, where banks got for every dollar that came in, they could lend out 10. And we have a indebted society. And be careful what you wish for when you want the government to raise rates, because it affects a lot of things. But the CPI won't be capturing the data. So the Fed can play this transitory word when it was just a step up in one single phenomenon, housing. And it's not captured in all the data mechanisms. So if you listen to Lex Friedman's podcast with Peter Wang talking about and philosophically about money, we have to have a come to Jesus moment about class and economics for people who don't have the resources to have health insurance, to have any participation in retirement assets, because that was the hedge against inflation for the last 20 years. But if there's going to be inflation like the 70s, I don't know necessarily where it's going to come from unless it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of every being worried, trying to pull up the ladder all at once, and it becoming a scarcity supply chain thing. If we can, because a lot of economists are talking about the roaring 20s coming back after the pandemic. We just can't get through this transition phase without going at each other with a moral panic. That would be wonderful. But I wanted to mention that CPI data is not going to show inflation because they don't do rents. The big game here is landlords are going to have been distributed in so many different ways that I'd like to see how that chapter plays out. But that's going to be 10 years in the making. And I'm
Thank you, David.
I have a quick thing to add here, especially when I hear fractional reserve banking is bad, and comparing that with crypto, which is no reserve banking, zero reserve banking. So people need to make sure that that fractional reserve banking is at least you've got something that you have in your assets that you can lend people out of. While crypto, there is nothing. You are really just lending people out of thin air and then fluctuating the prices. So again, be careful what you wish for.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I would call crypto fictional reserve banking. So I'm not going
I
down
love that.
into
I love it. Thank you.
that's fine. You can. I guess we'll all trademark it together and do it as a decentralized thing. Anyway, the point I wanted to get across is debt got out of control. Too big to fail became consolidated more. Too big to jail. So we never got to the prices of housing in the global financial crisis. Even people in finance don't philosophize and think about it. It wasn't until the Financial Accounting Standards Board in March of 2009 changed for the banks who had been stress tested and meeting with the Fed and the Treasury for months that they changed from mark to market, which is a true price, fractional reserve of something, real money back then, to fictional reserve banking to mark to model. They could model what their value in 3 years would be. Well, of course, they could all start lending and getting the illiquidity out, which was really the crisis of 2008, was an illiquidity thing. Crypto is the solution to illiquidity to the people that believe in it, because it is decentralized and nobody can get to it. And it's all the things promised when you pull up the ladder. Ask Marie Antoinette.
Ouch. Okay, so let's get into the tech headlines that we've been now waiting an hour and 11 minutes for. And the top story, there were quite a interesting prelude to the news today. We need the air horn to make it official. There it is. The first story is from CoinDesk. The Jack Dorsey, the crypto messiah, the Bitcoin messiah, we should say, the Bitcoin maxi messiah, Jack Dorsey, and others propose a legal defense fund for Bitcoin developers, citing multi-front litigation and threats. The main purpose of the fund will be to defend developers from lawsuits regarding their activities in the Bitcoin ecosystem. The block founder, Jack Dorsey, wrote in an email to the Bitcoin dev mailing list. A few bullet points here. Dorsey wrote the proposal in an email dated January 12th to the Bitcoin dev mailing list, shared on Twitter. The email was signed by Dorsey and Chain Code Labs co-founder Alex Morkos and academic Martin White as Bitcoin Legal Defense Fund Board. The main purpose of the fund is to defend developers by finding and retaining defense counsel, developing litigation strategy, and paying legal bills. According to the Post, the fund's first activity will be to run point on coordinating the defense of Craig Wright's tulip trading lawsuit against various Bitcoin developers in relation to a breach of fiduciary duty with regards to the theft of crypto from Mt. Gox hack. On-Tier LLP, a law firm representing tulip trading, has been given the green light by a London High Court to serve papers on 16 Bitcoin-related developers in a fight over funds from the defunct Mt. Gox exchange. At the same time, Wright is suing groups that hosted the Bitcoin white paper for breach of copyright. The fund is free and voluntary for developers to use if they so choose. The email reads, it will start with a core of volunteers and part-time lawyers. The fund's board will determine which lawsuits and defendants it will help defend. And at this time, the trio says the fund is not looking to raise outside capital, but may do so in the future at the direction of the board. In December, Wright was found not liable for a breach of business partnership with the former associate deceased Florida computer forensic expert Dave Kleiman. The suit was focused on claims that Wright developed the Bitcoin protocol on his own, or if it was a partnership between Wright and Kleiman. Wright's claims that he is Satoshi Nakamoto were not tested in court. Okay. Next up, number 2. Samsung, which has announced a January 11th event for the Exynos 2200, didn't show up to its own product launch. The Exynos 2200 was supposed to launch on January 11th. It didn't. Nobody knows why. So here's a crazy story. Samsung was supposed to have a big system on chip launch today, but that launch did not happen. And then there's a follow-up story from Korea that says after failing to appear at its own launch event, Samsung says the Exynos 2200 will be unveiled alongside a new smartphone likely in late January or February, without really giving a concrete reason for missing the initial January 11 event. Okay, next up from Bloomberg. Sony confirms PlayStation 4 production will continue in 2022, which sources claim will help the company offset some PlayStation 5 production pressure. Next is Washington Post. Federal judge rules that the FTC's amended suit alleging that Facebook has a monopoly can move forward after a ruling last year threw out the FTC's complaint over lack of evidence, and which we covered in real time when it happened last year, which was about 5 months ago, where the court threw out the FTC's antitrust or monopoly case against Facebook. And then it was decided that they could go back to the drawing board and give it another go. And now they're going to give it another go. So that's the update. There's a sister-related article from Casey Newton saying that the FTC's suit against Meta comes too late to really matter. But its scrutiny of Meta's VR acquisitions shows it's determined not to make the same mistake twice. Okay. Interesting side point there. Next is Wall Street Journal. London-based Checkout.com, which offers payment processing tools, raises $1 billion at a $40 billion valuation. Next, Coinbase says nearly the entire company will shut down across 4 separate recharge weeks for employees in 2022 to avoid burnout. Clever strategy for trying to avoid burnout and reducing churn, employee churn. Which, by the way, I think at some point the rest of the world will get wise and hip to what Scandinavia has been doing for hundreds of years, which is they take 6 weeks off in the summer, and it's a practically religious exodus where everyone goes out into nature and sunbathes for 6 weeks and comes back with completely fresh new eyes and totally recharged. And it's been the secret sauce of the Scandinavian productivity for, again, hundreds of years. And they swear by it. And if once you participate in yourself, you'll agree it works. It's fantastic. You get the whole company all taking 6 weeks off all at the same time. The company goes on pause. No one's allowed to email each other. Everyone gets a true, legitimate break, unlike what's happening in the West these days, where everyone takes turn taking breaks, and you're still getting emails, and you don't fully get a full recharge. And it turns out people need a full detachment, full recharge. I swear by it. As an American, and I'm one of many who have become converts, as you can hear in my voice. It's a really interesting formula that they have, where they do these, unified. Not just the whole company shuts down, the whole country shuts down for 6 weeks, and it's a sacred time to be with your family and roll around in the freshly grown grass and eat a lot of crayfish.
How do they provide customer service during that period?
They don't.
What if, for example,
because
patient, the user has problem? Where do they look for help?
They come back in mid-August.
What, the buy now, pay later problem will have to wait for?
Correct. All things
Wow.
wait. Yeah, but
yeah, we actually shut down everything. The hospitals are up and running, of course, but they are running on reduced capacity as well. And the thing is here that since all the industries and all the offices are closed, and you actually get yelled at or get a GLAR if you mail and require someone to respond during the vacation, Sweden is really is really taking this the whole way. You want done.
Okay. The next.
These are,
yeah, go ahead, David.
Tyler. Yeah. So, that's something that we need to start having more of a conversation here in the United States with regards to, what these different forms of capitalism, and have more of a discussion about that, because, we have now a very, very just problem-ridden, toxic situation in so many different fronts here in the States. And, the examples of multiple countries in Europe, or just our own 20th century, and just this whole re-education on a socially multi-stakeholder social form of capitalism. If you look back at our 20th century and how it, as a multi-stakeholder form of capitalism, it created the American dream and upward mobility and things like that. So, thank you for sharing that, Johan, and Tyler. It's just something that, we've got a pretty big reset coming, I think, in our 2020s here in the States, that we need to address and face. But being thoughtful about your fellow citizen, and I suspect you have maternal leave, paternal leave, and things like that. Because it's important. It's just yeah. So
if I give you the how the maternity leave actually works in Sweden, you will probably fall off your chair. We actually get fully paid for 400 days that we can share in between the parents. There are 90 days set aside for each parent, which you actually you can give away 60 of these as well. So you have 30 days that you can't give away. But this is actually paid by the state for you to have 400 days. So all moms are home usually for the first 7 to 8 months, since you have the nursing part. And then the dads, and there are a lot of dads that actually take maternity leave as well. You done.
By the way,
Yeah, I mean,
just to highlight how seriously they take their summer break, there's a rather fun story in our Stockholm tech ecosystem of one of the unicorns. I recall it was True Color, who, by the way, just joined us on stage the other day. For those who remember my friend from True Color, which is one of the top 5 apps in all of India at the moment. Anyway, when they were doing a very serious fundraising round, Sequoia Capital, one of the best VC firms on the planet, had not yet opened their European fund and was interested in investing and said, they were deep into the negotiation stage of the round. And the startup said, we got to finish this by, I believe it was, second week of July, because we're going to shut down for 6 weeks. And Sequoia didn't think they were serious. They thought that was a joke or something. And they found out it wasn't a joke, because it came July 15th. They said, well, we're leaving and we'll resume, mid-August. That's how seriously they take it. You tell, the world's best investors to go ahead and put the whole thing on pause for 6 weeks. So the next article, David, you had a final point on that?
just taxes to get to a more of a harmonious way of living with each other. We just need to be thoughtful with regards to our expectations and shared expectation and how we contribute to that. So just kind of a rational tax structure that that can deliver kind of this kind of social form of capitalism that really was the greatest thing that America's ever given humanity, which was the 20th century form of capitalism. Thanks. Sorry, it's a old school boomer, just kind of throwing some retro at at the recording.
So the next article is from The Verge that Wordle, which is becoming a rather virally popular word game on iPhones, I'm starting to see it everywhere, and now Wordle clones are becoming very popular. However, the article says that Wordle clones in the iOS App Store are starting to disappear from the App Store after reports surfaced about many clones capitalizing on the popularity of Wordle. It seems Apple has taken action, but as usual with all things Apple, there's a bunch of unknowns as to what's really going on behind the scenes. Very interesting. So the next one's from TechCrunch, that consumers spent $170 billion on mobile apps globally in 2021, up 19% year over year, with 230 billion app downloads. The average American spent 4.1 hours on apps per day. Next big...
Apple announced that they paid $60 billion to developers. So part of that went to, like, 60 billion of them on the iOS or on the App Store went to developers. So if they paid 170, we can guess how much Apple's cut was and how much Google's cut was, and all sorts of cool things like that.
The 170 is across both platforms, so it doesn't, in the headline, doesn't break down what percentage was Apple's. So the next articles from...
Dude, can we get a legal opinion if we have someone on stage who can speak to the copyright rules on game design?
That's a tricky one. There's a whole lot of what do we call it? Creative inspiration going on, creative license going on in the game space, similar to fashion or food, where people kind of feel like they have liberties to replicate certain game elements.
Copyright exists, Tyler, to your point, but each instance we're going to evaluate is fact-based, right? Like, are they trying to create a derivative, transformative, et cetera? There's a lot of different uses. And so, as you say, it's complicated.
Yep. Yeah.
I'd love to know, like, if somebody was trying to rip off Tetris, just as an example, to make it something kind of simple to educate people on. I'm just, it is in a lot of the software legal space, the patents, trying to go after some kind of trying to patent the underlying technology and stuff like that is a common approach. But the just copywriting the look and feel is another tactic. I'm just wondering if that's a part of what Apple's trying to help out with, or if it's just monetary.
Okay, so the next one's from Bloomberg, that Magic Leap, which, my goodness, has been at it for more than a minute. They were building some sort of AR glasses that, everybody in Silicon Valley has had a chance to check out, and every investor in Silicon Valley is very familiar with the whole labored history of Magic Leap. A whole lot of fundraising, and still no consumer product out yet on the market. So Magic Leap has now pivoted towards healthcare / defense, meaning both, and manufacturing markets with Magic Leap 2, which will cost more than Magic Leap 1's $2,000 to $3,000 price tag. The company has enlisted companies such as heart mapping startups and neurotech businesses to try out its new technology of its rather expensive hardware. Next up from
So the expense. I'm sorry. Just so the razors and blades kind of platform business model that was popularized by consumer games. You can dump your goggles and hardware price only if you're making money on software. So to do a pretty serious pivot back into enterprise applications,
right.
Everybody should understand that's those. All those goggles or what have you, they're going to cost a lot more because of the installed base is just not going to be as robust or not as big.
So the next one's from Bloomberg, that Alphabet Workers Union, meaning Google, Alphabet Workers Union complains that contract workers receive COVID-19 testing that is inferior to the $949 Q Health devices given to full-time work-from-home employees. Okay. And the New York Times is covering that, saying why some workers are getting all the COVID tests they need. Yeah, well, it's because they're full-time employees and not contract workers. I'm not quite sure what the brouhaha here is about, that they're treating their full-time employees differently than their contract workers. Is that the charge? I think everyone could plead guilty on that, and we can move on. The next is
usually the contract workers, their own companies pay for that, so it's not probably Google's problem.
The next is from the Wall Street Journal, that Kim Kardashian and other celebrities are facing a class action lawsuit for allegedly leading investors into an Ethereum Max cryptocurrency pump and dump scam. The lawsuit alleges celebrities made false or misleading statements to investors about Ethereum Max, but they're disputing that. And my own buddy...
No way, I thought that seemed completely legitimate to me. I'm totally surprised, Tyler, by the way.
You can hear the shock in Ben's voice, and you can hear the shock in my friend Jason's tweet, at Jason, who was my invitee into Clubhouse. As you can see in my bio, Jason says, shocked. You can't pump tokens, get paid, and make civilians the bag holders and get away with it because you're a celebrity? Question mark. Kim Kardashian, Floyd Mayweather, among celebrities sued for allegedly leading investors into a cryptocurrency pump and dump. So just like our friend Ben, my dear mate Jason is shocked, absolutely shocked. What's going on here?
Well, Tyler, when the Kardashian show, which is going off TV, the main one's going off TV, they'll have something else to do. They could go run rooms in Clubhouse promoting their stuff. Think about it.
I can't wait to see the Kardashians doing social shopping. That's going to be amazing. The next one is from Facebook, aka Meta, that Meta elects DoorDash co-founder and CEO Tony Zhu to its board of directors. Zuckerberg says Zhu has experience solving complex challenges in commerce. So, hint, hint, wink, wink, Facebook wants to bring in somebody from DoorDash who has extensive expertise with solving complex challenges in commerce. Facebook bringing it. Do you see where this is going? Do you see what I've been predicting since the beginning, the very first episodes of Tech News Around the World back in, March or April of 2021, that Facebook would become an e-commerce platform? I pretty much have said it every day for the past, 9 months. And here's just further proof of that. So I'll take the prediction points. You can go ahead and DM me My congratulations, my well-earned congratulations on that prediction. So the next one's from a new article that just came out that over 80 fact-checking organizations tell YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki that its measures to combat misinformation are proving insufficient and propose solutions. So 80 fact-checking organizations are telling YouTube CEO that YouTube's measures to combat misinformation are proving insufficient. That in itself is, we could debate this endlessly, and no doubt I would love to know what those 80 fact-checking organizations feel about Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the rest of it. And yet these platforms, in the vast majority of cases, generally aren't responsible for fact-checking. Legally, they have no strong, they have the Section 230 safe harbor clauses that they are platforms. They don't need to editorialize. Technically, they don't have to fact-check it. They do so because people get, they feel their feet being held to the fire in similar headlines such as this. But don't forget, they fall under the same framework as your local telecom operators in terms of platform protections that prevent them from needing to police the content on their platforms. So,
Hey, Tyler, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. There's legal requirements, and then there's like your visibility and reputational requirements. And
right.
so you're correct on the legal, and then you're also correct that people are going to try and turn the screws differently if the laws aren't, as they want them. And so they're going, when I was at Viacom, we had a lot of pressure from groups where we were well within our legal rights. But the additional thing here is that people just don't understand in a lot of times how challenging it is to even address that content, because what is misinformation and what is, misinformation to you versus somebody else, or onerous to one person versus another. I mean, there are things that can be done, but it is extremely complicated. So again, just highlighting the societal focus here.
Right.
I'd like to push back on the mountain of how complicated it is, and I totally respect what you're saying with regards to it being complicated, Jennifer, and all that. But we've got AI, we're trying to do some heavy building of mountains in so many different domains. And so I just want to just gently push back on that because we've had the laws on the books. Look at taxes, right? Look how one of the reasons why Amazon was able to just emerge as it has, one of many reasons, is because the tax laws were just taxing things on the internet was just not something that was done right away and done for decades, quite frankly. So I just like the content moderation of what people are doing in messaging. There's absolutely AI technology that's addressing that in the gaming space. So I just want to just gently push back on the idea that it's
even using those. I agree with you, David. There's more
yeah,
that can be done. I totally agree. But
that's all.
these technologies are just moving so quickly, right? And so it's hard. And AI is a tool, but it's not the end all be all, right? It's you still have to be trained. It has to be. There's going to be people complaining if they are subject to.
Has to be right.
Yes.
I have to say though, David, I'd like to support that as well. I in my experience, in the very limited number of things that I know anything about, I find that the deeper I understand the topic, the slower it appears to move. So if you understand physics, for example, and everything that relies directly upon physics doesn't appear to be moving that fast because the fundamental laws of physics aren't changing. And that really helps you spot bullshit really quickly. Everyone seems to want to push fact-checking to be somebody else's responsibility. So I think that we can do more ourselves if we deepen our knowledge in certain areas. How you do that in areas that are outside of your remit, I don't know. But
I think
certainly as a community, I think we can do a good job.
I'd like to pivot on that real quickly and say, yeah, we YouTube need to reach out to the community and basically get some help, make some sort of like local boards for like specific areas where like more people who are more inclined to be experts in their field are pitching in. If you're talking about COVID related item, they'll review it, and based on like whatever they review, their review carries a little bit more weight than other people. But still keep this within the community, allow people to find issues with whatever is being posted, and then take some actions. Maybe train the AI to follow track or understand what these people are or how these people are making their claims. I think they need to sort of reach out to the community to help them with that. Sorry.
No, totally agree on
So,
community experts, but again, and I agree with that in theory, or in as stated. But you've got to also, when you talk about dis or misinformation, we're not just talking about COVID, which is science based. We're also talking about politics. I mean, this is a broad swath, right? And this is where you're going to get people with differing views of what is accurate or true. But I do believe, and that's a great comment, that things need to be community based, because that's actually the problem right now, is that we're also separated and espousing different beliefs. And so it would be really helpful if people could just actually come from community and from real people, right? And just real beliefs, or have some accountability here. So, yeah.
so, and if you say here, I would like to pull out something you said there. If AI was to do this job, one of the things it would very much do is use weightings. And you mentioned the word weighting, and you said that some people's opinion should be weighted slightly higher than others. I think some people's opinion should be weighted massively higher than others. I think somebody that has studied medicine for 15 years back to back every hour of the day, and then spent the next 25 years clinically watching people in hospital and dealing with the full outcomes and seeing them come in at their worst and interviewing them 2, 3, 4, 5 years later in clinic, I think that person has more to give on the topic, if it's on topic, by orders of magnitude than somebody who thinks they've got some opinion because of I don't know what. And the same for any other topic
Totally.
where
Right.
you
In
have
community
an
review,
expert with
I agree,
decades of
Ben.
experience. So
And
I think you
peer
need to
review,
weight
no
that not
peer review there.
1.2. Exactly. Yeah, weight that not 1.2 times, but 150 times or something. And then you get closer
Totally agree.
to use.
Yep, there will be experts who are million time more than like the average opinion of a person, because this is a guy who actually spent his life studying this thing. I totally agree with you.
Can I point out that one of the very few successful crowdfunding or crowdsourced projects, the whole wisdom of the crowds, was Wikipedia? Google would literally put it ranked as the very first search result for like decades. The YouTube, basically, when they said, oh no, this is a controversial thing or it might not be here, the first thing they do is they dump it onto Wikipedia. And Wikipedia, the way they do checking or fact checking is they literally just basically have a page and they say, look, here's all the ads people have made. Good luck with that. And look, here's a giant citations thing. That update for the interface has not been updated in 20 fucking years. And I find it really remarkable that Google has all this, we sponsor all this open source, we do other things, while relying basically on one of the few things, when people are saying is something true or not, a lot of them go check this thing. They couldn't bother to basically have a single intern in one of their Summer of Code initiatives spend literally, a month updating that interface. I don't think that a lot of these efforts are really in good faith. I think it's just enough to do some PR aspects, because it's really remarkable how little effort is actually put into the basic tools we use to actually validate information.
And,
Chris,
and I
Yeah,
think you,
I
I think you point up the fact that relying on human expertise and overweighting it is really, really important. But the point you just made, and I believe it's a compliment to um, the human expertise, is having a beginner's mind. And so having people with great expertise and experience, as well as a beginner's mind operating off first principles, is less likely to be mistaken based upon applying legacy experience to novel situations. And there's a lot of novelty in the current situation, and the difference between freedom of speech and freedom of speech. So I think the emphasis on human expertise is terrific, but I would add beginner's mind.
absolutely. I love
Tyler,
that.
I would like to, yes, support Ben's point and also highlight that on Clubhouse, we have this medium where we can have such experts who have vast experience, who are published authors of multiple studies. They have access to the data that normal people don't have. Even us physicians don't have data, access to certain specific studies because they are highly specialized, like in terms of infectious disease. Infectious disease data. So somebody who is working in that specific field for a long period of time have maybe our principal investigator on a clinical trial, which is not even now public or available to other physicians. And not to mention the paid subscription to such studies that are available to physicians and not available to general public. So when you have access to such expert who have access to all this data and who come and present all the data meta study along with the proven results, along with his expertise, along with his peer reviewed approval on Clubhouse, we have this unique opportunity to have access to such knowledge and information. And that, I believe, is a great way forward in terms of learning and have access to knowledge.
This point has come up quite a few times in a few different rooms, and I just want to make sure everybody understands how easy it would be for Google to really clean up their act with regards to the Google search experience. And Ben, you kind of touched on it when you talked about scoring, or different people did, and Chris with regards to Wikipedia. But loading the interface that is just simply color coded, and the algorithm. I think community is definitely going to be great for the for a part of how the version whatever would be, but they've got responsibility to push it down into the algorithm to really suppress misinformation. And this is not, it's not, y'all, it's not the biggest rocket science. It's not. They're doing it all the time. Doing color coding, getting expert opinion. I heard in one of these rooms on Clubhouse, in a COVID conversation, a gentleman had some information he wanted to share. He found something and he just thought it was kind of interesting and he thought it was important. And he wanted to share it, but he also said, talking to a bunch of doctors, that he was nerding out. And so I was kind of behind him a little bit, tongue in cheek, right? I was kind of, behind him a couple spots in queue. But when I was able to share my thoughts, I thought, you know what, nerding out is having your butt in a seat and studying for 12 plus 15 years in med school and that. That's nerding out. Clicking and searching for even half an hour, 30 minutes, that's not nerding out. And that systemic problem is strangling us and killing people, right? And so, we all need, and again, we need to learn from COVID and just how devastating quite frankly, and I'll just say it, the Google search experience and lack of discipline to clean up, to rev the Google knowledge part of our journey. Anyways, I'm David. I'm done speaking.
I just want to add, David, you're so right, because knowing something, reading something is totally different than actually proving that you know the concept by passing those strict exams and gaining that label or that title after you go through that rigorous testing. That is a totally different way of solidifying your knowledge than just reading through something, making your own concept, and not passing through a standardized exam that a lot of specialists go through.
I'm going to say a heresy here. I don't think everyone should have access to the internet. I don't think it's a universal net good, and I think that essentially
Here,
that
Chris.
it has not actually pushed us forward as humanity. Parts of it have been
Absolutely.
extremely useful, extremely powerful, and unlocked a lot of good. But the net effect, I'm not
It's a
necessarily
massive
certain it's basically a net good. I think
it's
that
a
essentially
massive
if we had a
psychological
smaller number of
crutch.
people that basically could understand and work with these things, I think we could all benefit from it. But you shouldn't have to rely on this just to exist. It's ridiculous how far we push these systems without exploring the underlying philosophies and whether or not they actually work or not. And I
Ben,
think that we're starting to reach some limits.
this is a
Sorry,
super
Chris, about
interesting point. Go ahead, Ben.
Sorry about talking over you there, Chris. Changing Wi-Fi hotspots, bit of a delay. Some really interesting points there from a few people. Chris, the internet. A friend of mine said to me, if you just look everything up, how are you ever going to understand anything? And I thought, well, hang on, you understand things by looking it up, but actually, you don't. This ties into the first principles. So somebody said, look, work from first principles, from a beginner's mindset. Completely agree. I built my whole business success on that. I was cheeky enough to tell the world that I make the best courses on game development, not having ever opened even a game engine when I made that promise. Managed to deliver on it by learning it and teaching it simultaneously from a beginner's mindset, but built on strong first principles, built on computer science knowledge. So one thing would be I don't think you can start from first principles if you don't know the first principles. So I'm just so grateful that I know some first principles in a narrow field: statistics, mathematics, physics. And they serve me really well in the places that I keep myself where I'm comfortable. No good with people and all the rest of it. That's too tricky. But So that's one thing. I think, learn the first principle. Don't be afraid to investigate. I told a story before how somebody told me that my Nest Cam was transmitting when it was off, and 12 pages of Google told me the same thing. But they all link back to the same blogger doing an incorrect test. Eventually, after clicking through 12 pages, I, got off Google, as you say, Chris, turned the computer off, and went and used both an ammeter and a tool called Wireshark to find out for myself whether the webcam was sending images when it's off, and it isn't, by the way. But really, at some point, you've got to turn it off and work it out for yourself. They're slightly inspired and picked up. I'm in a boiler suit right now, doing work on my plant on a plant room. And it's because, Tyler, you said the true wealth is the ability to feed yourself shelter, energy, water, and so forth. And I'm really starting to take that to heart these days, that if you can't sort your own shit out from first principles without external help, then one day that might come and bite you in the bum. So anyway, just some rambles.
Yep. Well, Mark Zuckerberg just bought a reservoir next to his farm. So he's spending the money that you are giving him in buying metaverse and digital goods. He's using to buy an actual water source for his food source in the real world. 17 million he paid for the land for the reservoir next to his farm. So the next one,
David, you did get the PM from me here in Clubhouse. Read that. Sorry.
Well, on this point of AI usage in moderation, Facebook claims that it only handles about 3 to 5% of moderation is done by AI. But here's a counterpoint in this next article that New York City is cracking down on AI during the hiring process. New York City Council has enacted a new bill that will go into effect next year and has monumental implications for the use of AI in the hiring process because they believe AIs aren't good enough in accurately filtering job applicants. So if it's sort of
not bias. It's not just filtering.
right. Well, you have to kind of assume then that bias also plays into what it decides to take down or not take down with regard to content moderation. If it's there's a relevant thread that connects the two articles. It's just an interesting additional talking point in that conversation. So the next article that I wanted to share is a bunch of fundraisings, as always. T-Mobile says it has not broadly blocked iCloud private relay, meaning Apple's kind of internal VPN system that came out in iOS 15. So T-Mobile says they're not broadly blocking it, blaming a bug in iOS 15.2, which says customers or T-Mobile customers with content filtering plans won't have access to it.
They're just trying to make sure that the wiretapping equipment's installed right that duplicates the traffic, and just a few mild bugs. They'll work it out soon.
I don't think they're deliberately doing that either. It's just that an artifact of their, safety precautions. Firewall, basically.
Of course, they wouldn't do it intentionally with stuff. They want to keep a very high degree of uptime while they're installing that equipment.
Why would they do anything intentionally when they can do it unintentionally? So,
well, remember, T-Mobile has a lot of customers, and intentionally blocking something really has to come with justification. They have a very good process at doing that. So, yeah, maybe this is just was discovered by total. Maybe this was an area or where malware has historically done something bad, and that's why it's been blocked or whatever. But I'm sure they'll fix it.
Yeah, whenever an encrypted communication channel has an issue or oops happening for major customers over in the millions, that's an automatic raise eyebrow. One of the more fun ones is, oopsies, someone dropped an anchor on a submarine cable. Well, I guess we're going to have to basically send down a ship to repair that. Wait, why did it happen on 3 different cables all at the exact same time? Wow, what are the chances of that? Okay, well, that's okay. We turned it back on. Everything works now. And then it's like, where was the Jimmy Carter submarine last time you saw it? This is... the thing is that once you start seeing these things happen, then it starts getting a little bit frustrating because it's like, well, is anyone actually legitimately dropping anchors on on submarine cables? How much do we actually need to worry about these things?
On that point, I want to invite up Jorn from Norway to give us some insight into Norway's internet cable getting cut off mysteriously. And the rumors are that it might be one of the many submarines in the area, in the region, that come out from Kaliningrad, kind of between the little piece of Russian property on the Baltic, squeezed between Poland and Latvia. So, is Jorn still in the audience? Is he? No, he's not. That's unfortunate. I would love to get an update on this new Norwegian internet undersea cable scenario.
If anyone gets a chance, the marine traffic in that area is really cool to watch on a map. They've like live marine trackers and ferries going back and forth. That whole region looks really cool on maps.
So, from the Wall Street Journal, General Motors plans to launch an online used vehicle marketplace this spring called Car Bravo, which will leverage its dealer network to compete with CarMax and Carvana. That's an interesting move. And now we get into the tweets that we've all been waiting for, like this one from Katie, who's on stage in the Twitter space. From the Wall Street Journal, how health and fitness trackers are about to get a lot more granular, is the headline. Many people have become accustomed to devices quantifying their steps and heart rate. That's just the beginning. And I don't know if I can read this as it takes the tone of speaking to my grandparents of things. But anyway, yeah, we've been making this point for a very long time that the health and fitness trackers are about to get a lot more granular with all kinds of new sensors to test pretty much everything, and that's going to change health as we know it and give asymmetrical power to those device manufacturers in becoming major players in the future of health.
The real one is that the tech companies have been banned from claiming that they're health companies because of the amount of regulatory scrutiny they go under. So they're like, we can't afford that. So they've been trying, they do the health and fitness market and wellness and stuff. They can still get the sensors on there. And then they just, as long as they don't make very specific health claims, they say it makes you genuinely healthy along these very specific things, then they can get away with it with stuff. The thing that's changed recently is now you have the tech companies going, you know what, we're bigger than medical now. Let's just go ahead and just go for it. So now you have literally the incoming FDA, head of the FDA is literally the chief legal counsel for Google. Johnson & Johnson, Apple just recruited essentially their CEO. They're just right now, they're just going on a buying spree for executives that basically just run the entire industry and just going, you know what, let's just buy in at the top here. So you're going to see those health devices explode here, if only because the regulatory scrutiny is just going to basically dramatically change to be favorable overnight. So this will be interesting to watch.
The granularity in the in the sensors is not where everybody should be focusing. I mean, you already have enough granularity to get you to move. Behavioral is the issue, as well as what the app is having you do from a food perspective. Your metabolism is a product of a few different things. I would urge you, in John Madison's profile, he has a really great article that everybody should check out. But just the when you're talking about health and all of that, it's kind of like you need some metrics, and you do need some data, lifestyle data, but it's the context that the app sets that's really important. And to me, what I'd be most curious, and I tell you it's going to happen, because if you look at the whole Apple Fitness app, I mean, talk about competing with your software developers, right? They are going to introduce some kind of a wellness app, and again, compete with a bunch of their own developers. And it's in that app. It's in the behavioral design of that app. It's in the, hey, what did you eat? Because all that stuff is actually very important within the context of what you're trying to do from your health perspective. So I mean, anyways, I just wanted to share a few of those things, because it is the apps, and it's in the behavioral engagement and all of the value derived from how the app orchestrates the interaction with the user. I'm David. I'm done speaking.
Okay, next up from Jeff G. I'm retweeting his article from Wired about as Kazakhstan descends in chaos, crypto miners are at a loss. The Central Asian country became the number 2 in the world for Bitcoin mining. when China banned Bitcoin mining. A lot of them went next door to Kazakhstan, where they had very cheap energy. And now the political turmoil and power cuts have hit hard, and the future looks bleak. And there's a really interesting point buried in here somewhere, which is the question: how much of this chaos that has gotten out of control in Kazakhstan is directly related to the energy costs and power cuts that came as a result of this incredible boost in Bitcoin mining. So in a very interesting way, can we blame Bitcoin for this Kazakhstan's collapse? Because
It's fun to do so.
yeah, it's fun to, but I mean, I think one could make this argument.
I mean, do you see what's happened to El Salvador? You've heard what's happened to Kazakhstan. Don't let the Bitcoin immigrants come with their mining farms. They'll basically destroy your local energy grid.
I'm just saying, the Bitcoin miners.
Ransomware things will spike. Essentially, everyone will start talking about NFTs. It's doom, doom, doom. They'll corrupt your culture.
Well, in countries where they are sensitive to fluctuations in energy prices or increases in energy prices, which much of the developing world is very sensitive to those things.
Well, it can make all that petrodollar thing just evaporate. And it's just magically, it's all fueled by Bitcoin now. Whether or not you've got access to an energy grid.
I don't know. I'm just giving the anti-Bitcoin contingent additional ammo in their arguments as a new debating point, which is it destroys.
Let's go.
Yeah. So next article is from Thomas Tong, that a robot caregiver project has been awarded a $1.5 million grant to develop a robotic arm that can safely feed people. And because, by the way, that's the end goal at the end of the day. Anyways, I don't care if you're disabled or not. The real end goal is to be one of those Greek gods and have a robotic arm feeding you grapes while you use VR. Is it not? Is that not the end goal? It is.
With a pan.
Yeah. Let's be clear. Let's stay focused on our priorities here. We all need robotic arms to feed us while we use VR. So
now the real question is, once you basically have the thing all worked out, you get it costing under like a couple $100 or so, and it's basically you put it in every nursing home and every essentially healthcare clinic in the world. Question is where their politicians being presented with the regulation for this will say, how would you like to basically make 4 million nursing jobs immediately go away? That literally the only thing that they're doing for this part of their day is just basically feeding people that basically do not have the medical ability to do so. It's like, well, gosh darn it. This is like the same thing that happened with automation for trucking. We've had highway automation for trucking industry literally since the 1980s, but they just somehow just couldn't get around to basically putting 8 million truckers out into unemployment. So we have to basically pretend like this ever shifting thing of but it's not fully self-driving unless it goes into the suburbs. There's a weird thing that happens when you get to the upper size of automation of politically whether essentially we actually deploy it or not, and then what will happen is they'll shift the barriers on that. Having cheap robotic arms is huge, not just for feeding people, but lots of other applications. The fact that we aren't putting every last ounce of our civilization energy into it is astounding, because the entire robotics market, like the entire thing, like last time I checked, was under $8 billion, which sounds like a lot, but I mean, we spend more on ice cream. So I mean, like, there is some really interesting disincentives for creating technology that have nothing to do with the tech or the economics, but have to do with the political stability of saying, hey, at least people have jobs and people know what we're doing. It's a weird little feedback loop that a lot of technologists don't appreciate.
Yeah, no, sorry, Chris. I've got to put on my counterpoint here. So, and I think you brought up an excellent example to really have the conversation. So, it does not always. There are definitely going to be specific markets and use cases where yes, take the human out completely. But this one is absolutely not it. Feeding seniors, there's so much benefit to having the conversation with them, the high touch. So this is a perfect example of an automation, just horrible idea of using automation to automate caregivers. Scaling caregiving, yes. To remove during a moment that's really important for the person getting the care, 0 sense, negative sense. You would, any kinds of proof of concept testing of this would explode. if you measured it properly. So, anyways, but I think this is a beautiful use case of how let's find ways as we continue to this vision of using technology, automation, AI, robotics, blah 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 blah. As we're adopting these different technologies, let's recognize that there is so much outside of the physical delivery of whatever the hell it is that's really the value. Sorry, I'm David and I'm speaking. Love you, Chris. You know that. Just wanted to.
Let me,
On
let
the
me jump on that, by the way, quickly, regarding the robotic caregiving. As you know, our populations are aging and we are living much longer, and soon we're not going to have enough people to do this work. So any ounce of help that we can get from robotics, I think, is a welcome, thing on the scene. We do need help, and a lot of it. So I don't think it's going to make nurses go away per se, but it will give us, access to some help to, take care of our aging population. I'm
It's
Sam, and
worth
I'm done speaking.
it's worth considering that nurses have one of the higher turnover rates, especially in retirement homes or nursing homes. I think the average is like 3 years last time I looked at it. That's in USA. I need to compare it for other markets, but the thing is that ultimately the business model for a lot of healthcare settings in this is you take some young people with like, hey, I just want to help people. You put them in a situation where you dramatically underpay them, overwork them, and then burn them out after a few years because there's plenty of other folks right behind them with stuff that you can basically treat even worse. If you put it essentially some sort of technological automation that allows them to do more, it's going to drive labor prices down further, especially if it basically de-skills the profession. Maybe that basically means that people can be more human to each other, but as long as we're working in a for-profit healthcare basically thing as the overall objective, it's going to optimize towards basically making the owners more money, and that doesn't always involve empathy. Sometimes it does, but not always, and that's something I think is a larger problem rather than the technology itself. The context that's deployed, I think, is really important.
I
okay,
agree with that argument. I also see a potential where ethically we can just support the nurses by doing other kind of work like dishwashing or cleaning or so much, involvement that, I mean, they spend so much time in doing so many other things, and patient interaction is also part of that job and service. But if these robots and automated services can reduce the load and work for these amazing people who are providing service, so they can spend more time direct in patient contact and communication, that would help them actually and reduce the burnout.
so speaking of robotic arms, I just pinned an article to the top of Clubhouse about robotic assisted legs called the Walkmate from Japan. And the Walkmate is essentially a, a device that you can strap on to your legs and goes around your hips and allows you to walk much farther, and up lots of stairs. And ostensibly, the article kind of alludes to benefiting elderly. So like we have electric bicycles now, we might soon have electric walking aids, which no doubt a whole lot of old folks eventually lose their balance and crack their hips and spend the rest of their lives with a lower quality of life. And this could extend the quality of life for a lot of people for a lot longer. Very interesting article. And apparently,
Oh, that reminds me, sorry, Tyler, of the similar exoskeleton device for astronauts in space to reduce their metabolic consumption of muscular energy when they travel or move outside of the spaceship, because their bodies are carrying those heavy suits, and they have to perform certain maintenance maneuvers outside of the spaceship. And that exoskeleton not only support their spine and joints, but is really good for them because it reduces all the weight that they are carrying with those heavy suits and support their joints and their back, and reducing that kind of strain on their body is beneficial. So it reminds me of that similar kind of exoskeleton I think NASA is using one of those new technologies and that exoskeleton right now for research.
Honda, as well as making these Walkmate legs, and no doubt Japan will be leading these types of technologies for the silver economy, as it's called. So the next one from Poppy, that all roads lead to hyper automation in 2022. 4 predictions on how technology innovation will allow competitive businesses to distinguish them. So I love the word hyper automation, like hyperinflation, which no doubt is coming. And the next one, also from Japan, meet the Smash Dragon, an armed drone to take out hostile UAVs, unidentified flying objects, essentially. While it's
It
not
takes
yet,
a killer to hunt down a killer. It takes a drone to hunt down a drone.
so it shows a drone with what appears to be a machine gun. While it is not yet operational, it has successfully completed live fire tests and is currently under advanced stages of development, the company said. The Smash Dragon. Get yours now with our special Tech News Around the World code. The next one is from Thomas Tong, that scientists built the world's tiniest antenna made out of DNA. Oh boy. Uh-oh. Do you hear that?
There's this crossing over.
Oh
Too many
no!
buzzwords here.
Here come you thought.
So we're looping back to where we started. Now we have the reason we have the G5 vaccine.
Right.
Oh my God, no!
The headlines. No, they hit too many keywords.
Here it comes. Here
Is
comes
it small enough to pass through the needle?
I can see the clubhouse room titles now. Okay, so yeah, that is a little worrying. Tiny antennas made out of DNA.
That's actually really cool. We've got everything from metamaterials to like software-defined radio to things with happening with like DNA origami stuff going on there. But it's it's 5G. Bill Gates is trying to basically infect us all.
Yeah, the only thing that can make that headline worse is attaching Bill Gates to it somehow. For the love of God, Bill, please do not invest in that company in any shape, way, or form.
I mean, it's kind of hard to because I mean they throw so many billions of dollars to everyone with like here you get a $10,000 grant, you get a $10,000 grant. One day it's like how many things have we backed? Oh, these 30,000 things. How many of these could be an issue? Oh yeah, about that.
So our friend Heyman from Toronto tweeted out about a virtual reality could help make therapy easier. Research shows many people are more comfortable speaking to an avatar in VR than a real person. 30% of participants preferred talking to about negative experiences in VR rather than in base reality.
Another thing to throw on VR, not just the empathy aspect, not just the hey you're more comfortable therapist. One that's really impressive is the for burn victims. There's a long standing one. It actually goes back to like 10, 15 years, like some earlier ways of VR called Snow World. And essentially, if you throw like snowballs at penguins while going on icy raft, your brain ignores the fact that your burn bandages are being changed out, which lowers the pain thing from like 8 or 9 to like some of the worst pain experiences as a human being to only a 3 or a 4 on the pain scale, with nothing more than just basically VR. Like put on the goggles and your brain instantly goes, "This isn't the real world. That's the real world. Is the ice world." Which is really interesting for people that are basically recovering from extreme situations about being able to like recalibrate. So I mean, there's some very real. It's not just how it makes you feel. It's like very literally, so your body's safety mechanisms will recalibrate around the stuff. It's crazy. We still haven't reached the limits of this stuff. It's gonna be interesting where it goes.
Okay, next one's from BB, and it's a chance to play our favorite show, Tech News Jeopardy,
otherwise known as Give It to Messi.
Watch out, Messi. Here we go from the BBC. People devote what percent of their waking time to mobile apps?
55%.
80%.
80.
40.
12%.
30. 25.
87%. 87.5.
30.
75.
85.
$1.
Okay.
42.
Who said 30%?
Me.
Jennifer.
That's
me.
Well done, Jennifer. Wins this round with the correct answer being 33%.
Congratulations.
Oh, so that's 1/3.
He wins a Tesla. Nice.
So the next one is from the BBC saying 1 year on, could Trump's social media ban backfire for the social media platforms? The ex-president was expelled from Twitter a year ago. What impact has it had, and will he be back?
You need to actually win at a coup to basically actually be banned from the platform, but then it doesn't matter.
I'm curious to see if this article asks the very important question I keep asking: is what happens to Twitter and Facebook if Trump wins the next election? Do they ask the question or not?
A, a key thing while you're doing that, Tyler, a key thing people need to keep in mind is, just kind of setting up a big or setting up a social network, a website, whatever, and trying to do what he's going to try to do is no easy doggone task. I'm not talking about the technology as much as just to create a user experience that is broad enough, has the breadth for a user to actually, like, say, leave Facebook or leave, Twitter, what have you. That is the task at hand, because it will die if all it's going to be is going to report to what the Grand Poobah has to fart out, right? Or, sorry, you shouldn't say that. Has to say or share in terms of his opinion.
Just launching a new social network, all you have to do is abandon your friends and family and betray everything you've ever believed in. Because ultimately, you saying, "I'm not going to talk to my friends. I'm going to ignore my family because they're messaging me on the platform I'm currently on." But hey, if I can give all that up, I can basically go with this quirky new thing with some weird random people that may or may not basically be, run out of funds in 6 months. That is a very hard business model to basically sell anyone on. And you see what happened to the Mastodon folks. I mean, Zuckerberg freaking gave them $10 million. Uh, it's crazy to see
Yeah.
essentially how much we become dependent on very, very specific things. As a little contrast thing, in China they've got the one app to rule them all, whether it's actually government supported and for various verticals. It kind of an interesting contrast where it's okay, just don't ever leave, and then we'll just add everything on top of that. There's
Hey,
different ways of doing this.
I've
I'm just
been
kind of
I've been
curious which way
thinking
we'll path
about
will take for the next platforms.
the most
Chris,
recent
there's
social
other things
media
besides
platforms
Twitter.
and wait, is someone else speaking? Oh yeah. I've been thinking about the most recent social media platforms, and I've seen that they, well, when it comes to this, it's like in terms of stickiness. So what is the pull? And obviously, it doesn't really start with, oh, I'm gonna totally leave another social media app. I don't feel like anyone that uses social media in general, like once you were pulled into Facebook or Twitter, you kind of just stayed on using social platforms, especially if it helps you generate business. So then there's a real reason to use it, right? But the question is, can you get someone to stay on the platform, let's say 2 hours, right? So, and then it's like a television channel, or a television network. So what time of the day do the most people use the app, and do they spend 2 hours when Trump is on there, let's say doing a live chat or something like that? And then there'll be other networks and other channels. So someone has a 6 p.m. slot, someone has the 8 a.m. slot, and all of these things, and you just build it through interconnectedness, and then people naturally become friends with people that they actually like. So it's not necessarily all the way to the end. It's like we know a minimum viable product, and what is the stickiness, and what's the entry point. And the entry point is maybe for 2 hours a day, there's an interaction, Q&A, AMA type stuff, and then it continues because people become friends and people like what the social media platform has to offer. Maybe it's like in quotes decentralized, right? And etc. etc. So I don't feel like it's such a far off, far fetched thing when we didn't really have Clubhouse 2 years ago. Actually, we literally didn't have Clubhouse over 2 years ago.
I just wanted to point out there's other social platforms. If you think about Reddit, which basically drove the meme stocks like GameStop and AMC, that was all done on Reddit. It wasn't done on Twitter. It wasn't done really on Facebook. So I mean, there's alternatives out there. Right now, he's just an ex-president. If there's a Republican primary, that's where it will start. If there's a Republican primary with him, let's say running against DeSantis or something, then a lot more people will start paying attention. And it doesn't matter where he is, whether he's on Reddit or Discord or his own thing. People will pay a lot more attention. When he's now becomes a viable candidate for president again, they're going to have to. So I mean so it's going to get done, and someone's going to put up the money, find someone to to build out the technology or whatever it is, and so I think he's, as long as he's a candidate, I think it's going to be relevant. Right now he's not a candidate, so he's not as relevant. So that's my thought on that.
Okay,
Yeah, and that was. Do you want to move on to? So,
real quick.
yeah, so I just wanted to say, just to carry on what Ken said, which was literally when what Ken was saying was exactly correct, right? So him being on the social media platform, wherever it is, it's going to add a flair, and people need something to tweet about, and people on Facebook need something to argue over, and Instagram, social media platforms need something to post, right? And these media networks need something to post, and it's just going to permeate throughout everywhere, and then people will get attracted to it, whether it is a social media platform or just a profile that is made on another network.
Okay. So the next one is that Evan and others and Thomas and others are sending in about a teen hacker, a 19-year-old security researcher, claims to have hacked remotely into more than 25 Teslas in 13 countries, saying in a series of tweets that he discovered a software flaw in the company's systems. David Colombo, a self-described information technology specialist, tweeted Tuesday that the software flaw allows him to unlock doors and windows, start the cars without keys, and disable their security systems. Colombo also claimed he can see if the driver is present in the car, turn on the vehicle stereo sound system, and flash the headlights. The teenager did not reveal the exact details of the software vulnerability, but said it was not within Tesla's software or infrastructure, and added that only a small number of Tesla owners globally were affected. His Twitter thread elicited a robust response of more than 800 retweets. Thank you for that, Evan and Thomas and others. And then JT sends in this one that I'm retweeting to the Tech News Twitter account, that according to Kuo, Apple's biggest leaker, Apple headset, the VR headset, will use the same 96-watt power adapter as the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Apple's rumored AR/VR headset will use the same USB-C power adapter included with the higher-end 14-inch MacBook Pro, according to Kuo. A little specific there. The next one, also from JT, that I'm retweeting now, is that the Apple Glass could adjust lenses to match users' prescriptions. Apple Glass could potentially be used by people that need vision correction with lenses that adjust to correct the wearer's vision. And the next is from Evan, from Fortune, that cannabis compounds stop COVID virus from infecting human cells in a lab study. In the study, the compounds bound to spike proteins found in the virus and blocked a step the pathogen uses to infect people.
More weed for everyone.
I'm willing to volunteer for any clinical trials that anyone's aware of.
The next one, I believe, was from BB, from Deloitte, a blog from Deloitte, and the title is The Four-Dimensional Puzzle, Mobilizing Global Ecosystems, Connecting Perspectives to Solve the World's Largest Problem. Startup ecosystem expert Tyler Crowley is shaping the future of media through social audio. From his home on a remote island in Thailand, he is building a fast-growing news dialogue platform whose game-like experience is key to success in attracting more and more users. So thank you to Deloitte, or specifically Daniel Sund Hansen in Norway, who works at Deloitte, who wrote a very nice blog post about tech news around the world. And he's usually in the audience, and he clearly enjoys it very much, and he wants other people to know about it as well. So thank you, Daniel.
We demand that you pin that reference to the top.
Okay, here it comes.
Congratulations, Tyler.
Well, congratulations to everybody, because it's very much about how the unique mix of brain trust that we bring together here to solve
Congratulations,
the
Tyler. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks to Daniel. The next one is from Tomoko from Bloomberg, that hackers can cut the lights with rogue code. Researchers show safety device used for electrical distribution worldwide could be hacked to turn off power, according to cybersecurity experts. Oh, you mean like take control of your own power situation, your own power supply, as they keep ranting about endlessly? Yes, hackers will hack the power grids, and and that's inevitable.
So manufacturing and industrial environments adopted SCADA controllers very early on, like way back in like late 80s, like early 90s. And the security model at the time was, well, this factory environment is way out in the middle of nowhere, and so if you're on site, obviously you're supposed to be here. So all these things got built out with literally like no security. Then later on, they're like, maybe that's a little over the top. Maybe we should add a inside security and outside security. So they basically put the bare minimum on these things, and then they never updated them. The amount of there's a website called Shodan where you can go and like look at all the exposed drivers and all the exposed little devices on the internet. The number of the industrial factory equipment that's just showing basic logins for anyone on the internet to just look up is absolutely astounding. And so when you see like, oh no, cyber hackers from Russia or cyber hackers from China or USA or Five Eyes or whatever, hack into all this equipment. Yeah, some of it requires James Bond stuff. Other stuff is literally just, well, they left the door open, so I guess it's now a national security issue. The problem is they don't want to pay for actually doing the upgrades. And so in order to motivate folks to actually do the proper security upgrades, they create this giant fear-mongering thing and create like CISA and all these other things to basically get everyone to go, oh no, the whole thing's going to collapse unless we spend billions of dollars on this whole thing. It's kind of a way of basically having government underwrite essentially really shitty security practices for many decades in a field that basically would rather just save a few pennies. And the cumulative effort eventually catches up. So yeah, fun stuff there. SCADA controllers, Shodan, joys.
So I used to sell industrial solutions back in the 80s. And so when people deploy stuff like that, it has to be out there for decades, right? And so doing a complete rip and replace is often kind of the right way to do it. So I mean, it's a challenging thing. You got to look at each of the specific requirements. The military. When departments of the military deploy things versus some of these other industrial applications. We have our infrastructure and just any kind of older infrastructure anywhere around the world. Quite frankly, the grid or what have you is not prepared for cyber battles. It's just not. So, anyways. There you go.
Okay. So Evan just found a fantastic article about the Neuro, which is the company that raised $600 million to do autonomous delivery of all of the stuff around you, including 7-Elevens are partnering with Neuro. And now Neuro...
They could have put a cow catcher on it.
They have released their third generation autonomous delivery vehicle, which will now have an external pedestrian airbag, which will deploy in the split second before it actually hits somebody walking on the street. And you can see it at the top of the clubhouse room. Hopefully Cheryl can share it at the top of the Twitter space.
My question is, if you're getting hit at 30 miles an hour and an airbag deploys, wouldn't you still fly and fall on the floor? That is a little bit of a serious question.
Could actually do quite a bit with things. That when you're in a crash, it's all about dissipating energy. Even small amounts of it can actually do a lot for being able to just, as long as you can vent that energy. What an airbag does is it takes the energy of going forward and crashing into things and vents all that energy sideways, so it's like redirecting it. But the hilarious part about this is, if this ends up working, are we going to start requiring this in like other vehicles as well, like just pedestrian vehicles just in general? It's going to result in some very strange robots like crashing into people and deploying airbags right in front of their faces right before they crash into them. That could be a very bizarre looking world.
Like I wonder, because obviously that's a 3D model, right? And I wonder if they are actually testing it on below the car, right? And actually not just having the airbags on the front of the windshield blocking the driver's view, right? But actually on the floor, where the bonnet is, and being able to actually cushion the crash, because a crash is a crash regardless, right? And all of that force is going to hurt you somewhat. So it's all about being able to, like you said, Chris, be able to dispense that energy proportionally and putting it lower rather than higher where it's going to hit your head. And if you hit your head, that's kind of like game over, whether it's on the concrete or on the bonnet. So somewhere lower where you can cushion the hips maybe and It's my thoughts when it comes to this is purely design. As you guys know, I'm a designer, so when it comes to this type of stuff, it's I find this is just a consideration.
The answer is very simple. You need to design the front of the vehicle to have a 45-degree slope, kind of like a big comfy chair, so that when it hits you, it knocks your feet out from under you and catches you in the front of the vehicle.
This is literally like from the steam engines. They're running over wildlife, and they start saying, "Okay, we're going to put cow catchers in the front of the trains." And
like
they have this nice
boy.
45 shaped thing. So we're just going to have the versions for pedestrians. It's like, oh no, the Google van's coming by. The terror went duck. This is.
By the way, this version goes 45 miles per hour. This new version, 72 kilometers.
That's great. It could do that on paper. Whether or not they'll let it go from the local regulator, that's going to be the real question.
So back in the day, I trained as a stuntman many years ago, and we got hit. We did car hits as one of the stunts up to 20 miles an hour, which was quite hairy. And the way we dissipated the energy was to hit the windscreen, basically. So you do exactly what you want. You want the legs to come out underneath. You want your main torso to hit the windscreen. The windscreen's actually quite soft the way it buckles. It's quite a welcome break when you're being hit by a car. So and then you want to go off to the side of the car after that. The very best guys can take a car hit up to 25, maybe 30 miles an hour, but for me, 20 was pretty fucking hairy. So,
tech news around the world. If you ever want to find out about how to get run by a car, we've got the experts here on stage. Ben, that's amazing.
The next one is might come in handy as well. General Motors is designing a fleet of vehicles for the moon. Here's what it will look like. So I'm sharing that tweet, and thank you to Shumba for sharing it. The only car company to put a vehicle on the moon is planning a sequel from GM, Lunar Vehicles. And Dr. Fran shares one that Facebook locks down patents for full body VR tracking. Facebook's iteration of the metaverse is set to get a lot less glitchy and have a lot more privacy concerns with full body tracking.
Hey, Tyler, I think maybe we should think about what it means for GM. That's a company that's basically been in a free fall since the 1970s and has lost massive amounts of market share in automobiles and had to be bailed out by the government. That you would think that they would focus on like doing things here on Earth correctly before they put something on the moon. I'm just saying I just find it incredible given that this is not a company that's operated well for 50 years.
They just need to do what they did in the 50s, where they got their CEO to become head of the Department of Defense. Like, that was literally what happened in the Eisenhower administration. It's like, oh, we spent all this money on highways. What do you know?
No, you're confusing McNamara. He was with Ford, and he was with the Kennedy.
No,
right?
I'm not confusing things.
No?
What's good for General Motors is good for the company. Engine Charlie was his name with things. It was.
Oh, I thought you were talking about McNamara was
We've had multiple heads of car companies, heads of Department of Defense. Before him as the General Electric guy. It's the clown car. But yeah, we just need to essentially at GM, if they want to basically go to the moon and really do it, they need to basically get the next incoming Department of Defense dude. They'll revive the company overnight. We'll come with some giant public infrastructure project, which happens to basically involve little GM rovers going everywhere. It'll be great. Wow.
We got a flushing?
Good slush.
Talk about a mic drop.
Okay, next up is from Evan that common office desk phone could be leaking info to Chinese government.
Hey, Dr. Fran, I think your mic is on.
Okay.
Yeah, I know this phone very well. I work in the enterprise comm space, and it's called Yealink, and there are millions and millions of these phones on desks, in businesses, enterprises.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise,
Phones by Yealink have been observed sending encrypted messages to Chinese servers 3 times a day.
When they say like billions of devices all run Java, it's like, isn't that a wonderful, wonderful thing? It's like, oh wait, Log4j. Turns out every single one of them that doesn't get updated now has a permanent backdoor built in. Whoopsies. It's like, okay, which devices could you have the popular name brand? Which of them have their issues?
I'm sensing a pattern because we heard this story with Xiaomi, right, with their phones pinging servers in Beijing and in Europe, and then we heard a story even with Zoom, which is a U.S. company, U.S. citizen CEO was pinging servers back in Beijing. So, yeah, watch those backdoors.
keep in mind if you build these same like devices and you take like an American like I kind of exaggerating this a little bit because nothing's actually made here anymore, but if semiconductors we got like 50-60%, but let's say you take an American phone supposedly and put it anywhere in the country, the same headline would read, device, phone essentially pulls servers back here in USA with things. What's happening there? It's like, well, it's pinging on the ad servers. De facto, it has similar
Well,
capabilities.
as you know, the question is who owns the keys and is there actually an encryption? In the case of a lot of these communication services like Zoom, they're actually not end-to-end encrypted, and you can record and stream the media from the video or phone calls. So it's kind of a big deal.
I think encryption
Even
keys are
Zoom
one of the biggest
is
piles of
banned by the
bullshit.
government, which is still a bit shocking given their U.S. company.
Encryption keys are one of the biggest piles of bullshit that was ever pulled over anyone. It just basically says who has the mathematicians. If you want actual cryptography, look at something called one-time pads. It's literally something that a 5-year-old can implement the encryption algorithm for because it's just sorting the bits, and you just store the data ahead of time. The fact that we use all these overly complicated schemes, which conveniently keep on leaving back doors at every single time that actually matters, sure, it'll basically keep out the script kiddies, but every time that you actually are having to actually defend something that's worth protecting, somehow it just magically doesn't work. I'm starting to suspect that essentially we might be way overcomplicating a lot of these security models. There's probably some much simpler ways to implement this stuff that actually works, but as long as we keep basically having these breaches, it's going to basically keep having these news headlines keep popping up about them.
Hey, Chris, I've done the one-time pad drum a few times in this room before, but it's not really practical for most cases. But I love it as a scheme. It's interesting. I'm just as a pet project setting up hundreds of like IoT devices at home. Home Assistant. It's called a system, open source system, but it means integrating loads of devices, lights, Hue lights, and IKEA Zigbee things, Wi-Fi things, etc. And I've just started putting the home devices. A lot of them are Chinese because they're cheap and seem to work quite well. I started putting those home devices on a separate, what's called VLAN, virtual LAN, a segregated network. And I don't allow those devices that shouldn't need to talk to the internet to do their job, to turn lights on, to open and close blinds, to actuate radiator valves. They shouldn't need to talk to the internet. But it's quite interesting when you stick them on a VLAN and monitor what they're trying to do and deny them access to the internet. They still work all right, but they don't half try, especially a bunch of the Chinese ones. They don't half try ET phone home really quite regularly, and there's no clear need for them to do that. So yeah, nice to segregate those bastards if you can.
I think you alluded to one of the most important principles of security, and security is a function of the third exponent of simplicity. So there's a lot to be said for simple is more secure.
Yeah, we also did a room in the security group, and there's another one today at 3:00 PST. If people in the audience are interested in how to do that, the segregating your IoT devices and your work devices and everything else. We did one yesterday on the things to watch for in terms of use and options, and they'll get a little bit more into the structural and technical stuff today if people are interested. And it's in the security mindset room, 3:00 PST.
Did you record yesterday's session, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's under my
Could
club.
you
It's the
is there a
law tech.
way
Yeah,
is there a
yeah,
way to pin a recorded session to the top of a room? If not, could somebody suggest that to Clubhouse?
yeah.
Does
And
it?
I'll find out if I can send it. It's for people. If I can't
Yeah,
pin
send
it,
it
it's
to
in the
me.
law tech and I'll send it to Cheryl. It's in the law tech and InfoSec
Perfect.
group that we
Perfect.
do on Tuesdays. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'd love
Great.
to join those rooms, Jennifer. Do drop me a ping sometime if I'm awake here in the UK. I'd love to join in. That sounds fascinating.
Same.
Back to first principles. We're all using this stuff
Yeah.
so often. But how many people know the OSI model, the TCP/IP model? We're using all this stuff. Our privacy depends on it. Our security, as Tyler mentioned earlier about the Tesla, depends on it. I mean, Teslas have been rubbish for a huge amount of time. It's been so easy to make a crappy Android app that purports to do something useful for a Tesla owner that's sole job is actually, I say Android because it's slightly easier to get it published, but its sole job is to grab the tokens, the login tokens for a Tesla owner. And then that allows you to find the car, open the doors, do everything apart from drive it. To drive it, you have to do one extra step, which that wouldn't work. But you just have to issue a crappy app that says, "Hey, we'll tell you about your mileage or your efficiency," and then you've got this login tokens for millions of Tesla users. It's a joke, and they've only just introduced two-factor authentication on an asset that valuable. So yeah, they're just starting to do security properly, Tesla, but for years it was quite bad.
So
Yeah,
I
thanks for
attribute that
explaining. You done?
to. I'm sorry. I attribute that to hacking culture because it is absurd that somebody on the product team has not did not catch that, or they didn't have that kind of approach. So I
Oh,
mean, it's
no, but
mind
they
what.
cannot. Sorry, they cannot hack unless they know the name of your car, and then for you to drive the car, you need to add that PIN code. And if they don't know the
No,
PIN code, there's no way they can drive your car.
no, they can't drive it, but they can find your car, open your car, get into the glove box, do everything but drive it. And all you have to do is release an app, a shitty app that says to people, I'll do things on your Tesla for you. And they download the app on, particularly easy to do it on Android. They get the app, they log in to the app with their Tesla username and password, not using proper OAuth, which Tesla are only just getting on top of. And then you, as an app owner, now have their login token. So that allows
But
you to do everything with
Ben,
a car except for drive it.
don't they need to know the name of your car for that?
No, because they've downloaded an app and they put in their Tesla username and password. Tesla returns, firstly the app may just capture that, the username and password. Even if the app's structured properly and doesn't, it can certainly capture the returning token. And then you can use that you just go off to any other. Basically, the app, keep it simple. The app gets your username and password, right? Then the malicious person just needs to go and log into the Tesla app on their phone with that username and password. They can therefore find your car. They don't care what the car's called. It's just, here's a Tesla. Go find it, see where it is, unlock it, go in, open the glove compartment, flash the lights, beep the horn, do everything but drive it off. It's kind of crazy.
You also have GeoIP from the address itself because your phones typically give up that information as well.
So can
Obviously, you're right about the
somebody
PIN.
then can somebody steal the car by this way?
No, they cannot drive it,
No, you
BB,
can't drive
because
it
they
because
cannot drive it. They can do all kind of this funny stuff, maybe, perhaps, only if they know the name of your car, not the password and ID, the name. You name your car something and you keep the name to yourself. You don't share the name of your car to anybody. So only I know what my car name is. And unless they know my car name, they can't enter. That's what I know. And for it to
yeah,
drive, you
that's
need
that's
to
not
enter
that's
the
not true because I've
code.
done. Yeah, that's not true because I've done that several times. A lot of people don't use PIN to drive as well, though. It's not a requirement, and I actually can't be bothered with PIN to drive, so I can't be bothered to do that every time I get in. It's just an example. The point was that Tesla, a big company like Tesla, protecting an asset that at the time cost $100,000+, didn't even have the basic securities of 2FA. They've only just introduced two-factor authentication. OAuth, i.e., these apps have access to your Tesla. That would solve it. They never had that, which is why all these apps would just straight up ask you for your Tesla username and password. They didn't have any of that stuff, which was crazy. And I mentioned it to them about 4 years ago when I first got a Tesla. Obviously, they didn't do anything, but I took it seriously. I told the people as high up as I could get to in Tesla, but they didn't seem to care for years. It was quite interesting how lackadaisical they were, even as a forward-looking, technology company with guarding valuable assets. And there were a lot of people in Scandinavian countries using exactly that to find Teslas, get into them, and in some cases drive them off. But you do need the plain text password as well as the login token to actually drive it off. But anyway, getting in the weeds, but it's just.
All right. Next one to share today is from Evan about a amphibious drone system. Combines a multi-copter, meaning like a drone with 8 propeller blades, with an underwater drone. It appears to be Japanese because it has a KDDI logo on it. Amphibious drones, here they come. And Poppy shares this one about scientists say social interaction is the dark matter of AI. What's the missing ingredient in the secret sauce behind human level intelligence? Is it something we can teach machines? That's from the Next Web out of Europe. So just sharing that. And last but not least, a reforestation effort launched by Cardano, which is a cryptocurrency, has reached its initial goal of planting 1 million trees of different species native to areas across different parts of Madagascar, Indonesia, Nepal, Kenya, Senegal, and Haiti. A reforestation effort launched by Cardano has reached its initial goal of planting 1 million trees. There you go. And those are your headlines for today. So thank you to everybody for helping us do this yet again, as we always do every weekday and Saturdays. And we will see you tomorrow, Thursday, for another one. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Cheers.